My name's Eli. I'm 34, and I guess you could say I've always been the responsible sibling. Not the favorite, not the rebel, not the golden child, just the one who showed up on time, paid my bills, and remembered everyone's birthday. I work in finance, live alone, and don't really make a fuss about much. My family? Well, they're loud, close-knit in that performative way, and very good at pretending everything's just peachy while sweeping real problems under the rug. I've always been sort of adjacent, involved, but not embraced. The kind of guy you invite to weddings but never asked to be in the photos. Growing up, my brother Mason was the star. Charismatic, reckless, and always getting himself into some kind of trouble, but somehow he always landed on his feet. He had this smug charm that my parents ate up like candy. Even when he dropped out of college, blew through 2 jobs, and ended up moving back home at 28, they still defended him like he was the second coming of Einstein. I, on the other hand, paid my own way through school, held down the same job for over a decade, and helped cover part of their mortgage when Dad's hours got cut. But none of that ever seemed to matter, at least, not enough to earn me a seat at the metaphorical head of the table. Still, I never really let it get to me. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I kept my head down, sent the checks, replied to the texts, showed up for holidays, and smiled through the small jabs that always came dressed as jokes. Eli, you're so serious. Loosen up, man. It's just a party. Oh, we figured you'd be busy. You're always working. I took it in stride. I guess part of me hoped that if I just kept showing up, one day I'd be seen as part of the family, not just the one funding it from the background. That illusion shattered last fall. It started with a dinner. Mason had just gotten engaged to a woman named Brooke, who my mom had already dubbed an absolute angel, and my parents decided to throw a big celebratory dinner at this swanky rooftop restaurant downtown. Not the kind of place they could usually afford, which, in hindsight, should have tipped me off. I got a call from my mom a few weeks before. Eli, sweetheart, she said in that syrupy tone she uses when she wants something, we'd love it if you could make it to Mason and Brooke's engagement dinner. It's going to be such a special night. Of course, I said without hesitation. Just send me the details. And if it's not too much trouble, she added, lowering her voice, we were hoping you might help with the reservation. Just to hold it, we'll pay you back, obviously. I should have known right then that we'll pay you back meant I'd never see that money again. But like always, I agreed. I called the restaurant, booked a private space for 20 people, and gave them my card for the deposit. I didn't mind. Not really. It was Mason's night. And maybe, just maybe, this time I'd feel like I was truly a part of it. The night of the dinner, I showed up right on time, 7 o'clock sharp. I had on a dark navy suit, freshly pressed shirt, new cufflinks I'd been saving. I brought a nice bottle of champagne for the couple and even printed out a custom card with their initials. When I got to the rooftop, the hostess gave me a small nod and gestured toward the private section. I took a breath and walked in. The space was beautiful, string lights overhead, floral centerpieces on each table, a soft jazz band playing in the corner. And there they all were. My parents, Mason, Brooke, her family, a few of their friends. Everyone already had drinks in hand, laughing, talking, clinking glasses. I smiled and walked over, expecting at least a nod of recognition. Instead, Mason turned to me with that familiar smug grin. Oh hey, he said, barely glancing at the champagne in my hand. Glad you made it. Then he pointed toward a fold-out chair set off to the side, next to a trash bin, no less. Sorry, this table's for family only, he said, with mock sympathy. But there's a spot for you right over there. I actually blinked. I thought he was joking. I looked at our mom, who just gave me that tight-lipped smile she uses when she doesn't want to get involved. Dad chuckled awkwardly and raised his glass. Brooke didn't even look up. And then, as if on cue, a few people laughed. I stood there for a second too long. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat closed up. My ears were hot. I felt like I was 13 again, left out of a group photo at a cousin's wedding because I didn't fit the aesthetic. So I walked to the chair, set my bottle beside me on the floor, and sat down alone. I didn't even take my coat off. The waiter came by and asked if I was with the party. I nodded silently. He didn't ask any more questions. Just handed me a glass of water and moved on. I sat there for almost 2 hours while they laughed, toasted, opened gifts. I watched my brother give this long speech about how lucky he was to be surrounded by his closest people. I watched my mom tear up when Brooke called her the best future mother-in-law a girl could ask for. No one even asked if I wanted to order. Eventually, dessert came out, some kind of elaborate layered cake with edible gold flakes. The band played a slow tune. The sun dipped below the skyline, and I realized not a single person had looked in my direction for the past 30 minutes. Then the check came. I watched the waiter walk toward their table with a little leather folder. He paused, looked around, then glanced down at the credit card on file. My card. I watched him take a few steps toward me. "Excuse me, sir," he said quietly. "The total for the event is $3,218. Should I run the same card for the final amount?" Everyone at the table turned to look. My brother raised an eyebrow. "Oh, yeah," he said casually. "Eli's got it." The waiter looked at me, and I smiled. A calm, slow, measured smile. My voice was steady. "Not my table," I said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. I was told this was for family only. There was a silence so sharp it felt like the air had snapped in half. My brother's mouth opened slightly. My mom frowned, confused. Dad sat straighter. Brooke's dad furrowed his brow. The waiter hesitated. "Sir, you made the reservation?" "I did." I nodded. "And I paid the..." and nodded toward the trash can. Where I belong, apparently. You could almost hear the collective thud of jaws hitting the floor. For a second, nobody moved. The waiter stood awkwardly between tables, holding the bill like it was radioactive. My brother looked like someone had just slapped him with a fish. My mother's eyes narrowed. This got away from her so fast. "Wait, Eli," she said, her voice low and slightly shaky. "What are you doing?" I shrugged. "Following the seating chart, Mom. Mason said this table was for family only. I assumed that meant I wasn't included." I looked at the waiter. "I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I wasn't welcome. So I won't be paying." "Don't be ridiculous," Mason snapped, the smirk cracking into something uglier. "It's just a joke, man. Lighten up. You always take things so personally." The room had gone quiet. Even the jazz band seemed to be winding down to an awkward hum. All eyes were on me, and for the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking beneath them. "Yeah," I said slowly, "that's the problem. You think everything's a joke, as long as it's at someone else's expense." Brooke looked confused, like she was just now catching on that something real was happening. Her father, a stiff man in a blazer who had barely said a word all night, gave Mason a sharp look. "You invited this man to your engagement dinner and sat him next to the trash can?" he asked, incredulous. Mason scoffed and looked to my mom for backup. She straightened in her seat and smiled tightly. "Let's not blow things out of proportion. Eli's just being dramatic. He's always been sensitive." I almost laughed. That was her go-to line. Always had been. He's just sensitive. He's just tired. He's just overreacting. Any excuse to avoid admitting that something cruel had happened and that they'd let it happen. The waiter cleared his throat. "I'm sorry to interrupt again, but the restaurant needs to process the bill before we close the tab on the private space. If the card on file won't be used, I'll need an alternate." Silence. I turned and started to walk toward the elevator. That's when my dad finally spoke. "Eli, come on. You've already paid for half. You might as well just finish it." I stopped cold. That sentence, "that might as well," snapped something in me. I turned back. "You're right, Dad. I did pay the deposit. I even called 3 restaurants to find one with a rooftop view like Mason wanted. I picked the date around his football schedule. I ordered custom floral arrangements because Mom said fake flowers would look cheap in the photos. I paid the $500 non-refundable deposit without blinking. And I showed up on time, alone, in a suit to support my brother. I took a step closer, lowering my voice but not enough to be missed. And what did I get in return? A folding chair next to a garbage bin and a "sorry, family only." I turned to Mason. "So now you get to figure it out. You and your real family." Mason's face was flushed now, red creeping up his neck. He stood up, trying to puff himself up, but it just made him look more ridiculous. "You're making a scene." "No," I said. "I'm drawing a line." And I walked away. I didn't even bother with the elevator. I took the stairs, every step pounding with adrenaline and disbelief that I'd actually done it. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap, sharp and bracing. I loosened my tie and kept walking. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't going back. I brush it under the rug. But what I didn't know was just how deep the consequences of that moment would First, a text from Mason. Dude, seriously? You couldn't have just paid the check and talked to me after? Then another. For Mom, you embarrassed us in front of Brooke's entire family. Was that your goal? Revenge. And then, a call. From an unknown number. It was Brooke. Hi, she said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I know we don't really talk, but can I ask you something? Sure, I said cautiously. Did you really pay for everything? The deposit, the flowers, all of it. I paused. Yeah. There was a silence on the other end. Then, they told my dad you offered to. That it was your idea. That stopped me cold. I never offered, I said slowly. They asked. I said yes. I didn't expect anything back, but I definitely didn't do it for show. Brooke sighed. Well, my dad's furious. He thought you volunteered as a kind gesture. But now he's saying he wouldn't have agreed to the restaurant if he'd known it was being paid for by someone they basically shoved in the corner. I didn't say anything. He said Mason and your parents made him look like a fool. Another pause. I'm not calling to get involved, she added quickly. I just thought you should know. I thanked her, and we hung up. But the fallout had only just begun. Over the next few days, things escalated faster than I expected, and not in the way my family probably anticipated. It started with the group chat. You know the one, the big family thread that usually lit up around birthdays and holidays with recycled gifts, blurry food pics, and Happy Friday texts from my aunt. I hadn't heard a peep from it since the night of the dinner, but suddenly it roared back to life. Mom, Eli, we need to talk. Call me when you have a minute. Mason, you seriously messed things up with Brooke's family. You owe us a fix. Dad, this is getting out of hand. Just apologize and let's move on. I didn't reply. It wasn't just about the chair. It wasn't even about the bill. It was about everything that came before. Years of being treated like the emergency contact, the designated driver, the backup wallet. And now that I'd finally said no, they didn't know what to do with me. What made it worse, or maybe better, depending on how you look at it, was that Brooke's father apparently wasn't the type to take humiliation lightly. From what I gathered through a mutual friend of Mason's, a guy named Trent who'd always been more decent to me than most of them, Mr. Whitaker had a meltdown the night after the dinner. He'd paid for Brooke's private schooling, helped her start her marketing firm, and had apparently gone out of his way to plan a smooth, elegant engagement season. Only to find out the groom's side lied about who paid for the venue, treated their own family member like trash, and stuck him with half the drinks tab after I refused to pay the rest. According to Trent, Brooke's dad said something at brunch the next day like, if this is how they treat their own blood, what happens when you marry into it? Ouch. The ripple effects hit Mason like a freight train. Suddenly, wedding planning was on pause. Brooke had gone back to her condo for a mental reset, and the Pinterest boards vanished. My mother, in damage control mode, sent me a long email. Not a text, not a voicemail. An actual email. The subject line was, please. The body of it was 5 paragraphs of sugar-coated manipulation, all about how she never meant to hurt me, how she never realized I felt excluded, and how it would mean so much to the family if I'd just be willing to sit down with Mason and smooth things over. But nowhere in that letter was the word sorry. Just, we didn't realize. You misunderstood. Let's not let one silly night destroy the bond we've built. I stared at that last line for a while. What bond? Was it the bond where I drove 3 hours on Christmas Eve to bring gifts because Mom said Mason wasn't in the right headspace to shop for anyone? Or maybe the bond where I canceled my trip to Spain 2 years ago because Dad needed surgery and they didn't have the money for a home nurse? Or the bond where I co-signed the loan on their second car without even being asked twice? The same car Mason borrowed and never returned? I let the email sit in my inbox. I didn't reply. 2 days later, my Aunt Karen, Mom's sister, called me. That surprised me. She wasn't exactly warm and fuzzy, but she was sharp. A no-nonsense businesswoman who ran her own interior design firm and always had this air of barely concealed judgment. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. Eli, she said, I heard about the dinner. Of course you did, I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. I'm not calling to scold you, she said quickly. I just want to say good. About time someone shook the tree. That caught me off guard. She sighed. Look, I know how your parents are. Always brushing things under the rug. Always pretending things are perfect. But they've leaned on you too much for too long. And Mason? He's always gotten away with treating you like some kind of side character. I appreciate that, I said quietly. But why now? Because now the Whitakers are involved, she said, her voice dry. And your mom's panicking. She called me yesterday and asked if I'd be willing to talk some sense into you. I raised an eyebrow. And what did you say? I told her you didn't need sense, you needed space. And that maybe it's time they learned how to function without using you as scaffolding. That was the first time I felt like someone in my family actually saw me. Not as a checkbook, not as a punching bag, just as a person. Later that night, I got another text, this time from Mason. Mason, bro, Brooke's dad just canceled the deposit on the wedding venue. Said we're not aligned in values. Fix this. Not can you help me? Not I'm sorry. Just fix this. And that's when I realized he still didn't get it. He still thought I was a tool in his toolbox. A pressure valve. A wallet with a heartbeat. So I decided to finally fix something, but not the way he meant. That night, I logged into the shared account I'd set up a year ago, the one Mason had used temporarily while he was unemployed. The one he never got around to closing, but had his gym membership and Spotify linked to. And I quietly moved the remaining funds into a new private savings account I'd started. Not much, just a couple thousand. But it was mine. Funds I'd left untouched out of some vague sense of brotherly loyalty. Then I called the bank and closed the joint line entirely. The next morning, Mason called me 4 times in a row. And when I finally picked up, his voice was frantic. What did you do? I didn't say anything. Bro, I have a date with Brooke tonight. I was going to take her to that place she likes, and my card's bouncing. It says the account doesn't exist. I know, I said. I closed it. You what? You can't just. I can't, I said calmly. I can, and I did. You told me I wasn't family, remember? You don't get to use my money if I'm not even allowed at the table. He stammered for a second, then switched tactics. Come on, man. Don't do this. You're jealous. Admit it. You've always hated that I got the attention. Now you're just throwing it. Laughed, actually laughed. Oh, Mason, you really think he's on your side? There was silence. Then I said, don't worry, man. You'll figure something out. You always do. Maybe ask Mom to open a line of credit in your name again. Or maybe Brooke's dad can teach you how to stand on your own. And I hung up. I don't know what Mason did after that. But a few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time, not from him. It was an email. From Brooke. Subject line, I think we need to talk. I stared at Brooke's email for a while before opening it. The subject line, I think we need to talk, felt like the precursor to something big, something I wasn't entirely sure I was ready for. But curiosity and a strange sense of closure pushed me to click it. It was longer than I expected. Polite, but personal. Formal, yet laced with the tone of someone who was clearly unraveling. She started by saying she understood how awkward the dinner had been and that she hadn't realized how I'd been treated until everything came crashing down. She admitted she hadn't paid attention. I was so caught up in planning the perfect night, I didn't stop to see the full picture, she wrote. But that her father had been furious. Furious not just because of the financial deception, but because of the principle of it. He said if they can publicly humiliate someone who financially and emotionally supported the entire night, she wrote, then I need to seriously reconsider who I'm marrying into. Brooke didn't mince words. She said Mason had downplayed everything at first, calling it a minor misunderstanding. But once her dad showed her screenshots of the restaurant invoice, he'd requested a breakdown from the manager, the lies started to crack. Mason had told her I insisted on paying, that I didn't want to sit at the main table because I was introverted, that I'd left early because I had a work emergency. But once I talked to the waiter myself, yes, I called the restaurant, she wrote, the story fell apart completely. Then came the part one didn't expect. I ended the engagement last night. I blinked. She explained that it wasn't just the dinner, that the whole situation had pulled back the curtain on behaviors she'd previously excused. The casual entitlement, the way Mason talked about me behind my back, the way her concerns were constantly minimized. He kept saying you were overreacting, she said, but honestly, you're the only one who reacted with any dignity. She ended the email with a short note. I'm not writing this to pit myself against Mason or to drag you into drama. I just wanted you to know. I see it now, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I sat there for a long time, rereading it. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wasn't used to being believed. The next few weeks were oddly quiet. The family group chat died out completely. Mason tried calling twice more, but after I didn't answer, he stopped. I learned through the grapevine that he'd moved back in with her parents. Brooke returned the ring. Her dad sent out an official cancellation notice to the wedding venue and vendors. A few of Mason's old friends dropped off the map entirely. Apparently, some of them had been riding his coattails to Brooks' connections. I thought that would be it, that it would all just settle into silence. But then one Sunday morning, I got a knock on my door. It was my mom. She stood on my front porch in a long cardigan, holding a Tupperware container of lasagna like it was a peace offering. Her eyes were puffy, her makeup thin. I didn't say anything. Just opened the door a crack and waited. "I brought you dinner," she said. I didn't reach for it. I just wanted to talk. No excuses. That part surprised me. I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table like she used to when I was a kid, same nervous fingers, same forced smile. But this time, no passive aggressiveness. "No, you're just tired." "No, he didn't mean it." She cleared her throat. "I owe you an apology." I crossed my arms. "Just one." Her face tightened, but she nodded. "Fair. Probably more than one." She took a breath. "I didn't see it. Not because it wasn't there, but because I didn't want to see it. Mason's always been loud. He takes up space. And you never asked for anything. You just did. You handled things. You showed up. I guess. We started treating you like a safety net. Something we assumed would always be there. That's the thing about safety nets," I said. "People only look at them when they're falling. Never when they're climbing." Her lip trembled. She looked down at her hands. "Your father and I were wrong. We let Mason get away with too much. We let him treat you like less." I stayed quiet. "I know I can't undo that. I know a lasagna and a sorry won't fix years of imbalance. But I just wanted you to know, I see it now. And I'm sorry." I watched her for a moment. For the first time in my life, she wasn't dodging or deflecting. She wasn't defending Mason. She wasn't telling me to lower my voice or get over it. She was just sitting there, owning it. I nodded slowly. "Thank you." We didn't talk for long after that. She left the lasagna. I walked her to the door. She didn't ask me to forgive Mason. She didn't ask me to call him. She just said, "Take care of yourself," and drove off. After that, things didn't magically repair, but they didn't get worse either. My parents started sending individual messages instead of group ones. Short ones. Respectful. My mom invited me to Thanksgiving in a few months, only if you feel up to it, she said. I haven't decided if I'll go. Mason, from what I hear, is back to working part-time at some startup he hates. Living rent-free. Avoiding eye contact with mirrors, probably. He hasn't reached out again. And I'm okay with that. As for me, I started doing more with my time. I took that postponed trip to Spain. I bought myself a new set of noise-canceling headphones. I read books on boundaries, on family dynamics, on quiet strength. I even started seeing a therapist. And not because I was broken, but because I realized healing doesn't come from waiting for someone else to say sorry. It comes when you look at your own reflection and say, you deserved better. And you gave it to yourself. So no, I didn't pay the bill that night. But I finally cashed in years of silent debt. And for the first time in my life, I'm not sitting next to the trash can. I'm at my own table. And that table is enough.